There's the pass to Leitner. Puts it up. Yes!
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Camryn Chronicles. I'm your host, Ranjan Jindal, here joined by my co-host, Caleb Dudley. It's the last week, man. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm glad we're back for one more episode.
Yeah, final week. We have two very special guests joining us today. First up is Rachael Kaplan, our former sports managing editor. First time this year on the Camryn Chronicles. Welcome back, Rachael.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
And our first-time guest, Rodrigo Amare, one of our other men's basketball beats. Both of you guys made the trip up to Newark. Rodrigo, welcome on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it should be a fun one. But first, this podcast is brought to you by Duke Stores. Support your favorite Duke team. Duke Stores is home to the only collection of merchandise brought to you straight from Duke University. Go to shop.duke.edu for all of your Duke merch, plus some Final Four merch. So get it all there at Duke Stores. So I mentioned that you guys were up in Newark. We're going to talk about those two games. If you were not paying attention or just got tuned in, Duke defeated both Arizona and Alabama en route to the Final Four. The Blue Devils defeated the Wildcats 100-93 Thursday night, late Thursday night, and then bounced back with a 85-65 really dominant win against Alabama in the Elite Eight. And the Blue Devils will face Houston in the Final Four here Saturday. I'm going to be going there, so that should be super fun. And later in the episode, we'll welcome the sports editor for the Daily Cougar. Will come on and talk to preview that matchup. But let's start out with those second weekend matchups, first starting with Arizona. Rachael, I'll start with you. What were some of your kind of overall takeaways there? I know it was a great game from both Cooper Flagg and Caleb Love. Obviously, a bunch of storylines there, but Duke was able to pull out the win against a feisty Arizona bunch.
Yeah, I think that the biggest storyline is just how, Duke played its opponents very differently through those two games. Arizona was a shootout. Duke put up 100 points. And then, Alabama against one of the best, one of the fastest offenses in the country, how they held them to 65 points, which is kind of nearly unheard of. And Alabama did not have a great shooting night, but I think that it was really interesting how Duke was able to kind of change its approach, especially its defensive approach, dependent on the opponent it was playing, which would be really interesting heading into its matchup with Houston. But Shire and company was able to adapt, especially when, Flagg was not having his best offensive day against Alabama, but the team was just kind of able to take whatever was coming at it.
Yeah, Rodrigo, what did you see in that first game for you?
Well, obviously, Cooper Flagg was incredible in that first game. 30 points. I think it was 6 rebounds, 7 assists. And I thought it was interesting that the game was as close as it was because there was a point about maybe 5 minutes into the second half where it seemed like Duke was going to run away with it. And I think there were two key factors that prevented that from happening. And I think those two may continue to be a problem for Duke in the Final Four. And those would be opposing teams' offensive rebounding. Arizona had 14 offensive rebounds in this game. This was a big problem early on against Baylor. It was also a problem early on against Alabama. So Arizona got a lot of second chance looks, which was huge for them because often when you get an offensive rebound, you'll have a shooter wide open somewhere on the floor. So they really capitalized on those. And then also I noticed as Duke, built a double-digit lead, the refs started to call a lot more fouls in the interior. And I know this is, there's people who spew conspiracy theories out there and say that the NCAA is trying to keep these games closer because they know that Duke is so good and Duke can easily run away. But I did feel that in this game, as it progressed and as it got into the second half, the refs were kind of calling everything almost like too much to a certain extent. So those were like the two reasons I think why the game was closer than it probably should have been, because Cooper Flagg had obviously an all-time performance.
The fouls in the interior, especially on Duke's bigs, definitely became a very large factor, regardless of whether you're going to say that it was a conspiracy to keep the game close. But, with both Pat and Kamon having 4 fouls for, nearly the entirety of the second half, Duke's defense, at least the bigs, had to play a little bit softer. And, Khan did too. He also had 4 fouls for, I think it was probably the last quarter of the game. But I think that the way that the rest of the team was able to step up and, still play physical on defense, at least enough to keep that lead, even if it did, come down to 5 points at one point, was really impressive.
Yeah, and Shire wasn't going to play Malik Brown, although he was available and do that foul trouble. Kind of inserted him in that first half for a little bit because a lot of the bigs got into foul trouble, and that was an issue early on, and I think contributed to the offensive rebounds. I also thought in that second half, I mean, Caleb Love just started getting hot, and Arizona just pushed the ball pretty well in transition. It kind of reminded me a little bit of the second half against North Carolina in the ACC tournament, where you miss some shots, you get a little bit tight, the game pressure's on you because you're up by so much. And the other team gets a lot of confidence offensively. Like, I don't know if we've ever seen a team score 51 points and a half against Duke this season. Probably not, maybe. But I doubt it. And I think transition buckets were a big reason why, and just Caleb Love making some tough shots. Yeah. Caleb, what did you see from that game?
Yeah, nothing. I mean, I think you guys hit most of it.
Mhm.
I just think looking at the stats, like what jumps out at me is this: the shooting splits were unreal.
Yeah.
We've seen that a couple times with Duke this year. 60% from the field, 58 from three, 85 from the field. If Duke shoots like that, it's gonna have a hard time losing a game. And so you just a team effort. Cooper Flag 3 for 5 from three, Khan 2 for 2, Sion James 3 for 4, Gillis was 1 for 1 off the bench. And so just I think you keep seeing the offense somehow evolve even further. I didn't think that was possible, but they just keep getting better. And so yeah, just a good way to fight one out against a good Arizona team.
Yeah, definitely. Sion hit that big one there. I think at the end, it was like after the under 4 maybe, and he did a great job. And Cooper obviously was phenomenal down the stretch. But yeah, a good win for the Blue Devils, and also a good time being tested by some game pressure there. Moving on to the Alabama game, a completely different type of feel, like Rachael was saying earlier. This was a game that a lot of people were talking about, especially after Alabama's performance in the Sweet 16, but Duke completely shut the Crimson Tide down to 65 points on the offensive end. Rodrigo, I'll start with you this time. Obviously, the game was big for Duke, but why do you think Duke was so effective against Alabama, and what made the difference in that game?
I would say, well, obviously the main reason was Duke's defense was I would say this was the best game defensively all season, considering the opponent, considering Alabama is the number one offense in the country, and holding them to 65 points is quite remarkable. And I think that boils down to two factors. One is the positional size advantage that Duke had over Alabama's smaller guards. We watched the BYU game, the Alabama BYU game, Rachael and I, and they were just hitting every single shot. But it seemed like Mark Sears in particular, being a smaller guard, really struggled to hit shots over Proctor, to hit shots over Sion James, even over Caleb Foster. So that was a massive factor, and I think could also play a role against Houston. Houston also has 3 pretty small guards. And then the second thing would just be the versatility of Malawach, being able to go out onto the perimeter and switch onto any opposing guard. Like, there were several times Malawach was switched on to Sears, and if that had happened 3 months ago, you probably gotten nervous seeing a 7-2 guy out on the perimeter guarding one of the best guards in the country, and yet he did a phenomenal job. So definitely, in my opinion, the best defensive performance Duke has had all season, and I think that's the reason they won.
Yeah, and he had some great contests in that second half there during the stretch where Alabama went kind of scoreless for a few minutes. So big game from him on the defensive end. Rachael?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with all that. At one point, Sears, tried to drive in and just ran into Malawach, who's just standing, has more than a foot on him, and he just had absolutely no shot at getting anywhere near the rim. And that was just a really interesting sight, and I think that play really encapsulated what the game was. I mean, I think that the biggest thing from this game was that stretch at the end of the second half. It was over 5 minutes that Duke held Alabama scoreless. And I mean, Duke just did not take its foot off the gas. Even, like I said before, Flag was not having his best day. So a lot of the offense really fell to Khan and Tyrese, and they were just able to capitalize. I mean, Khan has just been nearly perfect from the line this year, which I think we've seen time and time again, and he was put on there with all of Alabama's desperation fouls there and hit all 7. But I think that the way that Duke was just able to kind of keep going, as we saw in the second half of Arizona, that when the momentum was kind of not swinging their way, that lead was cut from 19 to 5. And I think that the way that Duke was able to finish out that game strong against Alabama was really telling.
Yeah, it was huge. And offensively, I mean, it really, in that second half, I liked how Duke was very patient and drove to the basket, used the pick and roll effectively. Malawach had a bunch of dunks where he was just reaching all over the place to slam it home from Con and Tyrese. And against a team like Alabama, you don't want to get impatient and let them dictate the pace of play. And I thought Duke did a great job with that, especially with someone like Con, who said in the post-game interview that he's a slow guy. But, he does a great job driving to the basket, using his body and his footwork to finish with contact. And I thought he did a phenomenal job with that. And Tyrese, especially when Cooper wasn't having his best game. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything. I think the biggest thing for Kaman, obviously, the first half, we saw Aiden Sherrill, freshman for Alabama, hit a couple threes off the bench. And so, Duke had to change their strategy a little bit. So they decided to go away from drop and just let Kaman switch on to everything. And he did. Rachael and Rodrigo said he did a really good job on Sears. Sears was 2 for 12. But Tyrese Proctor and Sion James also had Mark Sears locked up the entire game. It's probably the worst game of his career. And I mean, those two guys are just and it'll be interesting against Houston, but there'll be just defensive backcourts all day long. And so I think you just see the backcourt, and every single game it feels like one of them just kind of takes up a different role. Proctor, Knipple, and James. And it's been really good. And so, come on, playing 31 minutes with Pat playing 6 and Malik playing 3 is huge for him. Not getting a foul, or he had 1 foul the entire game. Part of that's probably due to Alabama's play style, but still, seeing him have a long performance like that, where he stays on the floor for most of the game and dominates, is really encouraging.
Yeah. Anything else from you guys about that game?
I think it's interesting that kind of the two different ways that Duke played its games in Newark could also, that could be seen also in the Final Four, and if Duke wins in the national championship against Houston, I think it's probably going to be like a defensive slugfest like we saw in the first half of this game. But then against either Auburn or Florida, I would expect it to be a little bit more high scoring. I think that just shows just how versatile this Duke team and how they can really play two different styles depending on their opponent. So that could be something to look forward to this weekend.
Yeah, I think one more thing to look at from this game, especially looking at Duke's offense, especially as they're about to be matched up with Houston, is that it only shot 4 3-pointers in the second half, only made 1 of them. The entirety, basically, of that offense in the second half came, 14 of those points did come from the line, but it was all, shorter mid-range jumpers or points in the paint. And, Duke's going up against an incredible offense in Houston. And so looking at, its 3-point shooting, and if it's able to get hot, it'll be interesting to look at.
Yeah, definitely. And I think Houston presents a whole range of different challenges for this Duke team that we'll explore right after the break, because we're going to be talking to Camryn Alberigo, who's the sports editor of the Cougar, right after this. All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Camryn Chronicles. We're now joined by a very special guest. We have Camryn Alberigo, who's the sports editor of the Cougar, Houston student newspaper. Camryn, thank you so much for joining us today.
Of course. Thank you guys for having me on.
So let's just start off for people who may have not been following Houston very closely all year. Could you just kind of give us the Spark Notes version of Houston's season thus far? What's led to this point for Houston this year?
Most definitely. So the surprising thing is that we actually started the season 4-3, and we ended up slipping, I believe it was, to number 17 in the rankings after a bad trip to the Players Era tourney. There we had 2 overtime losses, one coming to Alabama and the other San Diego State. And prior to that, we had a loss to Auburn as well. So that kind of attests to those 3 losses, but all very close games. And it kind of just came down to Houston was adjusting to incoming point guard Milos Uzan. He's come a long way since then, and I think that was the biggest shift for Houston that allowed them to just suffer 1 lone loss in conference play to Texas Tech in overtime. And we're Big 12 champs 2 times in a row as we're entering the new conference. This year, we also won the Big 12 tournament, which we didn't accomplish last year. And then most recently, we secured a single season school record of 34 wins. So we just kind of came a long way, and it was a big shift. But once we reached our full potential, that's how it came down to be.
Yeah, awesome. A very historic season for Houston. And then, the 1 seed in the NCAA tournament has had a nice run in March Madness. I'm gonna start with that game against Purdue because obviously that went down to kind of the last play there, really well executed out of bounds play. But besides that, what were kind of your takeaways from that game? What allowed Purdue to kind of hang around and stay close, and how was Houston able to come away with a win there?
Right. I think being in that game was really good for Houston from the standpoint of a lot of people said it probably shouldn't have been that close. And I'd have to agree when you looked at the two teams, it wasn't looking like it was going to come down to the wire like that. But being in that game in the tournament, I think that's kind of what it's all about. And definitely, I feel like prepared the Cougars for what might come down to the stretch. But a key takeaway there is that that was a really bad night for LJ Cryer. He only scored 5 points in that game, but ultimately we were still able to recover from that, and we were able to secure other opportunities throughout the game that really let us stay in it, even when LJ had such a bad night.
Right. And then next game up in the tournament was Tennessee in a very different game. Houston's elite defense really showed up there. Talk about kind of the story of that game and why Houston was so dominant there.
Definitely. So that, as you said, we dominated start to finish. I remember very early on just seeing Sharp yank the ball away from a Tennessee player right there in the beginning. And that kind of just showed the trajectory of the game and how powerful our defense can really be. I mean, holding a number 2 seed to less than 16 points and a half, we held them to 15, I believe. That was like tournament history. And just kind of showed that from the get-go, we really were dominant. And a lot of people in that game, I don't think they thought it was going to be such a dominant showing. And we came out from the gate and really just put Tennessee away like that.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when you only lose 4 games and you hold a team to 50 points, you're obviously pretty hard to play against. What do you think makes Houston so hard to match up with? Maybe just some of their strengths as a team.
Right. So definitely the defensive intensity we play with in the program. Kelvin Sampson always says that like floor burns are a measure of success. You're always going to see Houston just on the floor diving for balls. They never really do let up. And if they do, you'll catch a glimpse of Sampson on the sidelines that you may not want to see. But I think just that he holds everyone to such a high standard in that regard that there never really is a chance for a breather. I mean, even in that Tennessee game when Houston had such a big lead, you'll still see Sampson on the sidelines directing and seeming pretty angry for such a big lead. But I think Houston as a whole, just that collective culture that really prioritizes the defense and never letting a rebound slip by, because at the end of the day, all those things add up and just allow Houston to be so dominant.
Yeah, I saw that video in practice of them like diving on the floor for the drills. That's big.
Yeah. In your opinion, if you had to pick an X factor for the Duke game, maybe someone who will get the most floor burns during the game, we'll see. Maybe a player that a lot of fans don't know about that could have a big role against Duke.
Right. So I think the unique thing about Houston is I don't think I can necessarily name a singular X factor because it seems like every game there's someone new stepping up to the plate. As I mentioned, like we had LJ Cryer, who wasn't having his best night against Purdue, but then against Tennessee, he was leading the pack. I mean, also Uzan, we've seen how far he's come. And then a guy off the bench that I think people should definitely keep an eye out for is Malik Wilson. He is just such a great rebounder, and he can just sky so high. And he's such a tough and hard-nosed player. I mean, I don't know if you guys saw against Kansas earlier in the season, and he had a clutch three-pointer that was able to send the game into double overtime. So very critical.
Yeah, very deep team there. So turning our attention to the game this weekend. Obviously, well, first of all, were you there at last year's NCAA tournament game between Houston and Duke?
No, I wasn't, but I watched it.
Yeah, that was a fun one. Came down to the wire last shot. So anyway, a lot of storylines in a rematch here. But what do you think are some of the keys for Houston to win? Obviously, this is kind of a clash of two of the best, and so obviously both teams are gonna have to play their A game to win. But if you're Houston, what is a key either stat, play, or just something you're watching that if Houston does this well, they can defeat Duke?
Right. So my main thing would have to be like what Kelvin Sampson calls unscripted points. So those are your points off turnovers, the offensive rebounds that lead to second chance points, and the fast break points. when Houston really is able to maximize, I'd say at least two of those categories in any given game, they're usually pretty good. And outside of that, I think it kind of comes down to talent versus experience in this game, which I mean, I guess could go either way if you're framing it as a strength or a weakness. But with you guys bringing in such strong recruits, I believe you have 3 freshman starters. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yep. So, like, with that, I mean, we obviously don't have that over here just yet with that kind of talent we're bringing in from the get go. But we have like the experience. LJ Cryer looking for his second national title. Roberts is in his 6th year with the program now. So I mean, we'll see how the freshmen handle the moment. Because at the end of the day, I'd say they still are freshmen despite their very impressive resumes.
Yeah, definitely. Clash of experience and a coach who's very experienced at the NCAA tournament level. Do you want to just plug what's going on over at your paper? I know the Cougars doing a lot of stuff. You can plug socials, website, any of that stuff.
Most definitely. So you guys should definitely follow us on X at the Cougar Sports. A lot of stuff going on there, whether it be mailbags or post-game interviews. And just check out our Cougar coverage at thedailycougar.com for all our articles.
All right, well, there you have it. That was Camryn Alberigo, the sports editor of the Daily Cougar. Camryn, thank you so much for joining us.
Of course, thank you guys for having me.
All right. Yeah, good stuff there from Camryn and great analysis across the board. Now we'll talk about this game a bit. Obviously, like I mentioned, a rematch of last year's game, but Houston is a much different team, especially with its ability to shoot the ball. Caleb, what do you think are some of the keys for Duke to win? I'll flip the script here and to move on to the national championship.
Yeah. I think it's definitely two conflicting styles of play. Houston's 360th in tempo in the country. They have no problem waiting the clock out and getting the right shot. So I think for Duke, maybe just trying to run out in transition when they can will be big. Houston isn't probably going to let up too much of that, but it's much easier to score on the break than in the half court against the Cougars. So I think it'll be interesting to see what happens there. I do think Duke has a pretty good size advantage there. Malawach is much bigger than Jawan Roberts down low. We'll see if that size advantage works in Duke's favor. And so yeah, I think obviously Houston is a constrictor on defense, and they're going to try to slow Duke down. They give up the 10th slowest possessions in the country. So I think it'll be interesting, definitely. I think from last year, for sure, the offense is much better from Houston. They're second in the country in three-point percentage. LJ Cryer and, Uzan have been great for them. So I think it'll be fun. Two of the best teams in the country, and definitely Samson's, just waiting to get that national championship for the first time.
Yeah, I'm watching a couple things. You mentioned Malawach's size advantage, although he did have a size advantage against Norchad O'Meara and kind of gave up a lot on the offensive glass there. So I think with as good of a rebounder as Roberts is, it's paramount to box him out because he's taller than him by a good amount, but Roberts is a lot bigger, a lot stronger. So it'll be important for Malawach to do that, which I think he did a better job of against Alabama. I think defensively, Duke should actually play kind of not similar to the Alabama game, but running them off the three-point line because Houston is not a great two-point shooting team, to be honest. They are. I don't have the exact number here.
They don't shoot.
They're 282nd in the country in 2-point field goal percentage, so at 48.4%. Usually it's Roberts with a left-handed hook, which he's very good at. But if you can stop him there and make those smaller guards score mid-range, score low percentage floaters, or at least shoot those, that is a recipe for success for Duke, in my opinion. And then on the offensive end of the ball, it's grabbing those offensive rebounds. It's just continuing to move it and be patient. I know Duke has done a great job using off-ball screens all season, and that's going to be the key. You cannot go one-on-one. You cannot go ISO with this team. And it's okay to take long possessions. It's okay to take your time. I think the pick and roll could be there for Duke, and I think it's just a matter of obviously hitting shots. You got to hit shots, but being patient there on offense.
Yeah, you said 2 percentage. Against Purdue in that close game, they only shot 37% from the field, but they shot 39% from three. So when you're shooting better from three than you are from two, not a recipe for success necessarily. I do think, Duke's interior defense is, one of the best. It'll be interesting to see, foul trouble could definitely be the kryptonite there. It'd be interesting also to see how Malik Brown, if he plays more, limited minutes against Arizona and Alabama. I don't think Coach Shire really wanted to use him for extended minutes unless they really had to, and they didn't. And so it'll be interesting to see, because he could be a good matchup for Roberts as well. So it'll be interesting to see if he kind of gets some more minutes there too.
Yeah, it seemed like Malik Brown is going to be relatively healthy to go, but it will be a physical matchup. So obviously want him to stay healthy there. But I think Malik Brown will play extended minutes, and it'll be big for someone like Ngongba and Gillis who need to get those rebounds. And Gillis, I think, could play a big factor because of that 3-and-D presence. And this is a type of game where, it's an NCAA tournament game against a tough Houston team. Gillis has played in a few of these. And so he'll really need to step up big time.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I think even like if you want to extend it out, I think every bench player really has a role they can fill against Houston.
Yeah.
Foster, they're going to try to tire out Duke's guards. And Foster, is very capable of handling the offense off the bench. So, and Isaiah Evans, there definitely could be a need for some couple spot threes against a defense as good as the Cougars. So, it'll be interesting. Hopefully, the depth for Duke will be really big in that one.
Yeah, and Isaiah will shoot it if 3 people are on him, so it doesn't matter. So he can put pressure. He's
I've said this I think before on this podcast, but I think he really is due for one of those big tournament breakout games. He's had those games that year where he just gets hot and cannot miss. He has not had that yet in this tournament, and so it'd be a tough one to do against Houston, but it'd really be impressive for him and his NBA draft stock if he could pull that off.
Yeah, great Final Four ahead, man. All 4 1 seeds: Auburn, Florida at 6:09, and then Duke, Houston at 8:49. Hopefully the first game doesn't extend too long.
Yeah, I mean, I think
maybe it does. Hopefully
that would suck, but I do think it's probably the best Final Four we've ever seen in terms of just pure talent on the floor. And it's been a great year of college basketball, and people complain enough Cinderellas, but I think at the end of the day, you want to see the 4 best teams have a chance to win it. I do think these are the 4 best teams, and it'll be really fun. Yeah, it'll be fun, good basketball.
All right, man. Final Four picks, national champion.
Yeah. I'll go Florida and Duke in the semis, and then I think at this point, I think Duke. I think they look like the best team in the tournament. So it'd be hard to pick against them right now the way they're playing.
Yeah, I did admittedly have Houston and the Rocket going all the way. It was more of a numbers game, to be honest, because I was in the pool with all Duke guys, and still am. But I think Houston, the part that worries me, at least for Duke, not worries me, but more gives me some pause, is the fact that Duke's played a lot of teams with an up-tempo pace that can score a lot on offense that are not super great defensively, but they haven't really played a team like Houston. I think the closest teams to Houston are Clemson and Wake, who are not nearly as good as Houston, but play similar. And Duke struggled against Clemson with its defensive pressure, and then struggled against Wake a bit in the first time they played. So I think it's not saying that Duke's going to lose, but I think it's a type of team that can make Duke work a little bit more. That said, I think the difference is the size advantage across the board. And I think I give Duke about 60-65% chance to come out of this one. And I think Duke does. On the other side, I actually think Auburn's going to win. I wouldn't be surprised if either side won, to be honest. But I just think Auburn can Florida and Auburn both kind of shoot the lights of the ball out of the ball, but Auburn just has this kind of swagger and confidence to that bunch that I think could take it far. I think Todd Golden's done a great job with Florida and could go either way, but I think we might get a Camryn Indoor rematch in the national championship. I guess I'll also say Duke takes it home.
Yeah,
we'll see.
Yeah.
But I will be there for all of it. We'll be covering it all on our website. I'll also mention Duke women's basketball had a tough exit there in the Elite Eight, but a great season for Carol Lawson's group. Defeated North Carolina in a classic Duke North Carolina women's basketball game.
It was
46-37 or something like that. I think. It was 48 maybe.
Sounds right.
And then the South Carolina game, man, they played really, really tough, and it came down to that fourth quarter. Duke took the lead even, but Don Staley's experienced squad really just started the fourth quarter with kind of an 8-0 blitz, and then just kind of held out the rest of the way. But again, the best finish in the Carol Lawson era, and they've kept improving every year. Missed the tournament, then round of 32, Sweet 16, Elite 8. What does that mean for next year? No, I don't know. But great season for them, and we have a bunch of good coverage on our website for that. So yeah, check out all of our coverage. Caleb wrote a great feature on Duke basketball student managers that everyone should check out. He's also writing another piece about Duke's connections to the Final Four. We have some opponent previews on Houston. We'll have some good features, especially throughout the weekend. If you're a student on campus, Camryn Indoor is the place to be, or I guess Craft House.
Wherever you want to be.
Wherever you want to be. But Camryn Indoor is a place to be. And yeah, pick up if Duke wins the national championship. There will be a print edition for you on Tuesday or Wednesday, and some more special gifts. So follow us all at the Duke Chronicle on our socials at Duke Basketball and Chronicle Sports. Duke Basketball will have play-by-play and live article updates for that. So thanks for another great season, man.
Yeah.
This has been fantastic.
Might be one more to talk about good old Portal Combat, but other than that,
yeah,
this is it. It's been fun.
All right, guys. Well, enjoy the weekend of basketball. Enjoy the 4-1 seeds. Sit back, relax, and just, have some fun. For Caleb Dudley, I'm Ranjan Jindal. This has been the Camryn Chronicles.